Who'd walk in this bleak place? Sylvia Plath ends the poem Winter Landscape with Rooks with a question. And it's easy to treat that as a rhetorical question and pretty much ignore it, assume we know the answer. Or if you're only reading the poem for an assignment, it's easy to ignore it altogether because you feel like now you're finished with the assignment. But that question is important. Taking the time to answer it honestly and thoroughly is probably one of the keys to the poem. Well, the first answer is easy. The speaker in the poem would walk in a bleak place. She is. That's probably one of the reasons for writing the poem. The next answer is I would. I have. I know those bleak places. That's one of the reasons for reading the poem. The third answer is we'd all walk in those bleak places. If you haven't yet, you will. You'll walk into them, you'll walk out of them. That's the reason for writing, reading, and discussing the poem. Now, I'm not going to try to explain or discuss the entire poem. I just want to look at 3 points that suggest it's not actually a depressing poem, that it really is an optimistic poem, and it perhaps is more about getting out of these bleak landscapes than it is about getting into them. First is the water at the beginning of the poem. It goes from moving through the mill race into the pond, where it seems to simply become stagnant. And that's also with the rest of the landscape being winter. It's cold, frozen, and dreary. But one thing that we do know about winter is that it does, whether we always want it to or not, lead into spring. And sometimes Eliot is right that April is the cruelest month. But that ice does melt, the water level rises, and the water begins to flow naturally again. Perhaps more important than that is that absurd and out-of-season swan. It glides across this dark water and cannot be touched by the darkness. The darkness doesn't even really recognize the swan, for it really only reaches after the shadow. And the swan is a very powerful, very old symbol, and Plath was fully aware of this, especially since she was so fond of the poetry from William Butler Yeats, quite possibly where she got many of these images. Once you recognize that this is a familiar landscape, that you have or will walk through one much like it, that's when it's time to actually start doing more thinking and digging into the poem. It's not that the answers are automatically there, just that now you have some reason of your own to go looking. And one of the places to start is that swan. It is absurd. It's out of place. One of these things is not like the other. That should make you curious. With a little bit of research, you'll find that the swan is one of the most common and powerful symbols in all of mythology. It represents almost every good thing you can imagine, and it crosses gender boundaries, represents power, creativity. It's an important symbol. And to find it there in the middle of this wasteland, undisturbed, untouched, that matters to us. To know that there is something within us that can withstand this landscape, even when it seems everything is already lost. There is something that doesn't give up, something that may be a rather tenuous thread, but it's still there. And when the swan eventually rises, we rise with it, and we leave that desolation behind. That's something that sometimes we don't even want to remember it. It hurts a little too much, but it's still good to know that it's there. Winter Landscape with Rooks by Sylvia Plath. Water in the mill race through a sluice of stone plunges headlong into that black pond, where, absurd and out of season, a single swan floats chaste as snow, taunting the clouded mind which hungers to haul the white reflection down. The austere sun descends into the fen, an orange Cyclops eye scorning to look longer on this landscape of chagrin. Feathered dark in thought, I stalk like a rook, brooding as the winter night comes on. Last summer's reeds are all engraved in ice, as is your image in my eye. Dry frost glazes the window of my hurt. What solace can be struck from rock to make heart's waste grow green again? Who'd walk in this bleak place?